You can watch the Wiltfong Whiparound on On3 Recruits every Monday and Thursday. Steve, you must have whiplash from the whipping around right now, because this is big season for you. You've got all these official visit weekends. I keep seeing interviews with people who say, I've got 6 visits lined up, and there's only like 4 weekends in this period before the things go dead. How intense is the competition for these top recruits right now, whether they are uncommitted or committed and looking around?
Well, it's closing time because a lot of these young men want to make their final decisions before the start of their senior seasons. And then even more importantly, the college coaches are the ones that control the tempo here, and they want as many commits in the fold before they get to fall camp and they can turn their focus to the season. Now, certainly spatula season will come again in the fall leading up to that early signing period on December 4th. But right now, kids are on the road taking their official visits each weekend here in June. Some are taking some midweek June visits to squeeze them all in. They're going to make their decisions in late June and early July. They'll focus on their senior seasons. College coaches will then pivot their focus to trying to win their conferences and beyond.
Yeah, and that's why there was discussion about maybe moving that first signing day into June. And I know the high school coaches didn't like that at all. But when you look at how the recruiting calendar has naturally evolved, that's where that date came from.
Well, if they keep moving that signing period up, then they're going to keep moving the official visit dates up. And I just think that these kids, their personalities, they're evolving and learning. They're changing, monthly at this point. I don't think they need to keep pushing it up. I was always a believer that the one date was just fine. Now, certainly from a workload standpoint, I'm happy that there's 2 dates. But really, even that date is now turned into the December date. So I just think I think it always benefited the athlete for them to know there was one date where all the cards were going to be on the table. Do I have a spot? Can I commit here? You keep pushing up these dates. It favors the coaches, but it definitely doesn't favor the athlete.
Well, and also if you just had one in February, athletes can still enroll in January. And so many guys want to do that. And you can kind of force schools to put their cards on the table with the early enrollment piece of it, because if there's no spot for you, they're not going to send you all the paperwork you need to get filled out and get your dorm room and all that. But also now with this new piece of it with the collectives, you kind of know what your deal is already.
Well, you're talking about for the blue chippers, but there's so many other kids that are just going there for the scholarship and the $30,000 that each player on the scholarship roster gets.
Yeah. Well, and that's the ones that need to make sure they have a spot. But you're right. It is the laying the cards on the table situation that, like you said, the coaches kind of had all the advantage there. Let's talk about some of these guys that are looking around and rooting. We had a flip yesterday. Keelan Russell, the quarterback from Duncanville, Texas, flips from SMU to Alabama. You guys definitely saw that coming. How did that process evolve?
Well, Alabama, they hit the ground running, that new coaching staff. They got their quarterback from Washington to transfer, Austin Mack. And then I think they took their time with the 2025 recruiting cycle. They knew after spring ball they were going to be able to get out on the road and evaluate quarterbacks. And one of the first ones they went and saw was Keelan Russell down at Duncanville High. And they fell in love with him and prioritized him. He moved to QB1 on the board. They had regular communication from Kalen DeBoer and Nick Sheridan, a lot of film study and X and O talk over the phone. And then they got him to campus this past weekend, and they loved the standard and the brotherhood on campus, in addition to the track record of winning under Kalen DeBoer, the development at the position with guys like Michael Penix in the offense, and then just everything Alabama brings to the table. This kid plays for one of the best high school football programs in the country. He likes that big stage. And no bigger stage than Alabama football. That's another thing he was looking for. So he is now in the fold for Alabama.
So let's talk about USC, because this was probably so far the the most star-studded class that Lincoln Riley has been putting together at USC. And it's interesting because we talk about what they bring in on defense, the way they've played defensively. And I think we've done all the analysis of how few top 100 defenders Lincoln Riley's been able to sign in his time as a head coach. But it certainly seems like they are much more attuned to that this year. And you look at that class, but it also seems like everybody is picking at that class. And so Isaiah Gibson is an edge rusher from Georgia who is committed to USC. But he talked to Josh Newberg last week at the Elite Series, and here's what he said. And after we hear from him, I want to hear from you about how things went for his visit to Georgia this week.
I'm still strong on my commitment. I don't plan on everybody says I'm going to decommit. Everybody says
you hear it, huh?
I hear it every day, but I don't plan on doing that anytime soon.
You think people just look at the distance and think there's no way he's going to stick?
Yeah,
but they've done it. There's been players go for Georgia to USC before.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're going to see. What does Lincoln Riley say to you? How often do you guys talk?
Actually, it's kind of on me because I've been missing kind of some of his calls, but I'm going to try to get on the phone with him today. I talked to Coach Henney before I got on. Me and my mom talked to him before we got on our flight here today, so I got to get back over to Coach Riley for sure.
All right. Now, you're about to embark on how many official visits in June?
6.
There's not 6 weekends in June, but you're going to take 6 official visits. So
yes,
you're going to take a couple midweek. What's up first for you?
Oh, like the first visit?
Yeah.
I got UGA the first week, the second week South Carolina, then I have a midweek to Auburn, and then that weekend I go to Tennessee. I changed it from Florida, and then after that I got the 18th to the 20th. I have Ohio State, and then the last weekend I have Oklahoma.
A lot of fans, I should say, are looking at that Georgia visit and thinking, man, is he going to come out of that Georgia visit committed to the Dogs? I mean, it's a big one.
Yeah.
What are you looking for on that?
Honestly.
Okay, so he's had the Georgia visit now, Steve. How'd it go?
I think it went well. Talking to folks that spent time with Isaiah Gibson at Georgia, I think he continues to see a track record for outstanding player development at a place that's close to home where the players there are achieving everything they set out to do as football players. Some buzz behind the scenes is that Georgia's very strongly positioned with Isaiah Gibson. So I think ultimately they're going to be hard to beat when it's time to put pen to paper for this 2025 recruiting class.
So another USC commit who was at the Elite Series last week is Juju Lewis, the quarterback from Carrollton, Georgia. And he's made it clear he's looking at a few other schools as well. He was actually at Indiana on an official visit. And we talked about the plan to visit there. We mentioned on the show, Tino Sunseri is the relationship there on Indiana's staff that goes back to, I think Tino was a GA at Florida State. Juju was a camper down there. Like we got photos of him from like 8 years old talking to him. Mm-hmm. But how did that go? Does Indiana have a serious shot at flipping him?
He plans on coming back to Indiana for the Maryland game. So they're tracking for a third visit here this calendar year. I think that with Julian Lewis, when he looks at his recruitment, he's trying to make the right decision for him. He is verbally committed to USC. He understands what that means. If you start for Lincoln Riley, you're going to be the first pick in the NFL draft. You're going to win a Heisman Trophy. It's about as big a guarantee as you can get under center. But I think that Julian Lewis and his family are continuing to monitor how they recruit around him, specifically defense, to go back to your original point. In USC, they've made some tremendous hires on the defensive side of the ball. Coach Deonton Lynn to run that defense. Coach Eric Henderson has quickly asserted himself as one of the best recruiters in the country. And certainly what he's done as a defensive line coach in the NFL is resonating with top prospects. But I think they want to see how these summer visits go with some of these guys that are currently committed to USC and where USC stands with those guys on the other side. And is it a defense that can be championship caliber? And in the meantime, you have Auburn that's in the middle of this one for Julian Lewis, and then Colorado. He's going to take a visit to Colorado at the end of the month. He has his official visit to USC this weekend. But I think that Indiana is more than just a throw in. I think that their school that he is looking at right now is a place where he can come in on the ground floor and help build it up with some coaches that he believes in. I mean, Kurt Cignetti's got a lot of swag to him. He's from the Nick Saban. He's a Nick Saban coaching disciple that's been very successful. Now he's got a big challenge. It's the biggest challenge of his career at Indiana, a place where nobody has won consistently since Coach Mallory did a few decades ago. But Julian Lewis got around that staff. The players on the team are pointing to a brand new culture change. They can just feel a difference in their football facility compared to what it was before. And Julian Lewis, with the relationship with Coach Sinceri, what he saw from the offenses at James Madison, and then he even pointed to a favorable schedule to Indiana the first couple of years. They're in the minutia of Indiana right now. Now, before people get carried away, I'm not predicting that he's going to flip to the Hoosiers, but I think that there is a lot for him to be excited about. And I think he's going to take his decision into the fall. There was some talk a couple months ago about him making a final decision before his senior season. I think now it's, well, let me watch some of these teams play this fall, because this whole thing could change again when the teams start playing games. So I think that how teams start out early in the year, Auburn, Colorado, USC, and Indiana, how teams continue to recruit, those are all factors that are going to be thought upon when Julian Lewis goes to make his final decision.
Well, and also if let's say Indiana doesn't get Julian Lewis, let's say he stays at USC or he winds up at Colorado or Auburn, but how much value is it for them even having him on an official visit weekend in terms of some of your other targets?
I don't know if I buy into all right,
No?
we had a 5-star on campus, so that's going to resonate with other people to come visit. I think this is one where they have a unique set of circumstances where they are ingrained in this recruitment and have a chance to take a swing and see what happens. And then in today's landscape of college football, maybe you don't win the first one, but you could win the second one. So there's still value to get a young man to campus, because when they go in the portal, sometimes things happen very quickly. So there's foundational knowledge there to bring a prospect in. I think for Indiana, it's always going to be a program that's a developmental program, right? Of getting guys that are high upside players that fit your scheme, fit your culture. Then U.S. football coaches get the best out of them. Now you're in a landscape where maybe you get the best out of them their freshman and sophomore years, and then schools, the power programs can then call them up and say, hey, we'll offer you $800,000 to come play here for your junior season. So it's a different landscape of college football, but Indiana is still one of those developmental programs where they're going to have to find these high up. There's a lot of good football players out there, Andy. You know that. A lot of kids with size, a lot of kids with length, a lot of kids that can run. As James Franklin always says, recruiting's about who you get, not who you don't get, and then maximizing their potential once you have them within your program.
Well, let's talk about where Julian Lewis is committed and where he's headed this weekend, because I am fascinated by this USC class, which is currently ranked number 3 in the on3 industry rankings. We will see. We just talked about Isaiah Gibson, but Justice Boone, who's a D lineman from Georgia. We mentioned Julian Lewis, who's from Carrollton, Georgia. Isaiah is from Georgia. Hilton Stubbs is from Jacksonville, Florida. It seems like the top of that class, they are going against the beasts of the SEC to get that class. It kind of reminds me of the Pete Carroll era more, where they were fine to go wherever they needed to go. Nickel Roby's from Frostproof, Florida. Leonard Williams from Daytona Beach. Mike Williams is from Tampa. Like they were not scared to go all the way across the country to go get somebody if they thought they would help.
Well, they're going to recruit nationally, and Lincoln Riley's a national name and a national brand. He took Oklahoma to 3 college football playoffs. He's one of the best in the country at what he does. Heisman Trophy winners, Biletnikoff winners. He's coached some of the best players in college football. And then USC, the excitement around the program, the investment in the program, being in LA, what they can do from an NIL standpoint, it's all attractive. But what's all said and done, you're being judged on what you've done most recently, and it's a prove-it year for USC. And if they can go out there with these new hires on defense, Coach Ling, Coach Henderson and company, Coach Belk is in the building. Those are guys that have great resumes, great track records. If USC can turn the national opinion on how they play defense in their favor, I think that you could see USC, these kids that we're talking about being potential flip watches, there'll be a lot less of that. I think that people are excited. They see the vision. But I think you're halfway in right now. You go out and you have a great fall. We'll see USC close a lot of these recruitments, get back in on some others, because this is a program that's certainly primed to be one of the best in college football year in and year out. That's what they brought Lincoln Riley in there for. And I think he's excited about it too. When you talk about what they like about their program internally, I think they love the offensive line class that they signed a couple years ago as they try and change a culture. Look, Andy, this is a program that was kind of soft around the line of scrimmage. They would typically get pushed around by Notre Dame in the trenches and programs like that. If you're going to win a title, if you're going to be competitive in the Big Ten, you need to be tough around the line of scrimmage. And I think that Lincoln Riley and this staff are slowly changing the narrative. And even within that, still that first year, they almost made the college football playoff. They were a Pac-12 title game appearance against Utah where Caleb Williams gets banged up. They still could have got in. Now, it would have been probably a tough road for them. And once they got in, but they would have been in. So I'm excited about USC's future, but I think from a recruiting standpoint, I think that they want to see what that looks like early in the season. And if there's a change in kind of the way they're perceived, particularly on defense, they got a chance to really close strong and keep some of these guys. And then moving forward, you won't bat an eye when they're in the mix for everybody, and you'll feel even stronger that they can hold them.
Well, that definitely has a little spice to that USC LSU season opener in Vegas, because that's one I'm sure a lot of these guys are going to be watching. I think I said Justice Boone when I meant Justice Terry, by the way.
Florida, baby.
Justus. But yes, Justice Boone is a edge rusher at Florida. Justice Terry is the Georgia player committed to USC.
Speaking of that opener, LSU versus USC in Las Vegas, Jakeem Stewart, the number one player in the On3 player rankings in the 2026 class, he's going to be at that game. He's a Louisiana native that's already been out to USC 3 times. USC very high on his list. Those are pivotal games for USC to say, hey, look, we are playing with the best programs in the country in this new era of USC football. And Jakeem Stewart being at that game is big, because I think USC is an excellent position for him. And that's another opportunity for them to show Jakeem, hey, this is your potential at USC.
So let's talk about Michigan a little bit, because I've noticed, a little more chatter about who Michigan might be about to get. They had a big official visit weekend this weekend, but this is Sharon Moore's first recruiting cycle here. And unlike most new coaches who get in there and have to sign a class in a couple of days, he didn't get this job until after Jim Harbaugh left. They'd already signed a full class essentially. So this his usually what is a coach's second year is his first. But how is that new staff doing on the recruiting trail? Are they going to have a bunch of commits here in the next few weeks as guys get to come see them for the first time and get to interact with them?
Well, right now they have the number 18 class in the country per On3. The jewel of the class right now is Nate Marshall, defensive lineman from Chicagoland, that jumped in the fold kind of quickly. I think it surprised some of his other top contenders, Alabama, Auburn, and Miami, to name a few. They thought he was going to take his visits this summer, but Michigan was able to shut it down, kind of the first big recruiting win of the Sharon Moore era. So I think that shows the kind of chops that they have and the kind of potential they have on the trail. And look, Michigan's never been a program that's recruited consistent top 10 classes, but what they had under Jim Harbaugh was arguably the best strength coach in the country, arguably the best coordinators in the country, arguably the best head coach in the country. And then they recruited hard-nosed, tough, physical kids that had high upside, and they got the best out of them, kind of similar to what we said about developmental programs like Indiana. Well, Michigan was a developmental program on the biggest stage with the biggest potential. And they're taking it slow this cycle, Andy, and they're bringing in guys. They want to make sure that the right culture fits and the right personality fits for them. And, they'll take it into the fall and they'll evaluate senior film and take guys that are having great senior seasons. So it's kind of an old school approach, but they'll have some guys on campus this summer, just like everybody else. They'll bring in a big wave of visits capped off by June 21st, when they'll have close to 20 of their top targets on campus. And I think they'll have a good chance to land a lot of these guys, and then they'll go into the fall and evaluate senior film and look for about 5-6 more guys.
So you mentioned USC this weekend has a big one. Who else has a big weekend this weekend? Who should we be watching coming out of the weekend in terms of commits and flips?
Well, Georgia is a program that immediately comes to mind here as Kirby Smart and his staff push for another number 1 ranked recruiting class. 5-star offensive tackle David Sanders Jr. is on his official visit to Georgia this weekend. There's been a lot of buzz around Ohio State and Tennessee in the spring for David Sanders, but Georgia's a program that's always been at or near the top of his list as well from a player development standpoint. And what Georgia's been able to do with 5-star offensive tackle is maximizing their potential and getting the best out of them. They're bringing in 2 of their top linebacker targets, and Tavian Wallace and Ty Jackson, guys that, first-round NFL draft picks at the linebacker position have been fewer and far between, but Georgia has as much to point to in that arena as anybody in the country. And so that's attractive to players of that caliber. So big recruiting weekend at Georgia this weekend. They're all over the country. LSU's hosting DeCorian Moore, the number 1 receiver in America. He was a longtime commit to them that recently reopened his process, was at Ohio State last week, has future trips coming up to Texas and Oregon, a lot of Texas buzz there, but LSU looking to bring that back their way. LSU had a 5-star recruiting weekend last weekend, Andy, where I thought they moved the needle with a lot of recruits. They have the number 2 class in the country, but they got a good chance to finish number 1 there in Baton Rouge.
Wow. All right. You mentioned David Sanders Jr. We met him at the Elite Series last week. This guy he looks like a plug and play left tackle. You just saw the highlights on the screen. This is a guy that everybody in the country wants. What do you think his recruitment comes down to?
Well, in addition to just the physical attributes that you talked about, he's also super high IQ, smart young man that'll be able to jump into any system and understand what he's supposed to do schematically, which also gives him an advantage to play early. His recruitment, early on, I thought Georgia was the team to beat. They got him to campus a couple times, got around that staff and environment, loved the game day experience. But as things have gone on, certainly Ohio State and Tennessee have put themselves firmly in the mix to land David Sanders. Alabama, he's keeping warm. He'll visit there. Clemson, he was there this past weekend. Pre-NIL era, pre-everything. Maybe we're leaning Clemson here strong. Grew up a Clemson fan, but there's a lot of factors going into recruitments right now. And Nebraska, he took an official visit to Nebraska over Mother's Day weekend. He's like, Dylan Raiola went there. He said that was one of the reasons why he went out there and took that visit. So we'll see if the interest in the Huskers, how real that is. So there's still quite a few players in the mix. But if you're asking me the programs that I'm looking at the hardest right now, I would say Georgia, Ohio State, and Tennessee.
Yeah, interesting. Tennessee hasn't had a 5-star offensive line signing since Darnell Wright. So that would be an interesting one because, yeah, exactly right. And so that because that's always been with the Heupel offense, like, oh, okay, they don't really have to go get the big 5-star lineman. But if you talk to the coaching staff there, no, they want that because it just opens up what they can do offensively. But you mentioned he took a visit to Nebraska, and our friend Nathan says, ask about Nebraska. So I will ask you, how are Matt Rule and company doing now that, Dylan Raiola is in the fold? Looks like he's going to be the starting quarterback come this fall. How are they doing in terms of the class of 2025?
Well, they've been getting a lot of prospects to campus. They went out there and they landed their number 1 quarterback target, TJ Lateef, which it was going to be hard for them to recruit that quarterback position with the 2 guys that they signed last year in Dylan Raiola and Daniel Kalen. But TJ Lateef, a 4-star passer from Orange, California, gives them someone that could come in there and push that room. Nebraska finished with a top 25 recruiting class last cycle. And I think that with the guys that they have still out there, guys that are taking visits, big in-state targets like Christian Jones and Chase Lofton, they have a chance to finish in that top 25 again. Douglas Utu is a major target from Bishop Gorman. They seem to be in on a lot of guys. They're bringing in a lot of their top targets at the end of the month as well, kind of similar to Michigan, like we talked about. And I think that they have a good chance to land a lot of those players that are coming here in June. So Nebraska, this is an ultimate, like Matt Rule is the ultimate development coach, like finding guys with traits. They're not afraid to offer players first. They're not they like to mine for talent. They're not about, well, how many other schools have offered or who else has offered this kid. If they think you're good, if you're good enough, they'll offer you a scholarship. And they're also good at projecting. Maybe you play only receiver on the high school level, but they're like, that kid will be a hell of a DB. Or maybe you just play defensive line on the high school level, and they're like, we see this young man being a difference maker on the offensive line. We've seen Matt Rule do that at Temple and Baylor, and that's the recipe at Nebraska. The one thing they got to fix at Nebraska, Andy, is changing a culture of losing every single close game. Have you ever seen a program? I mean, I don't know, like zero. How many zero close?
It's insane.
Zero. It's like 0%. They have not had any bounce go their way. In the Minnesota game, this year was a reminder of, like, they got to fix that. Like, it's a complete internal culture thing. Like Texas and USC, they were not tough. They kind of turned into powder puff programs. Steve Sarkisian fixed that. They're tough around the line of scrimmage. They're hard nosed. They're ready to come into the SEC. USC getting there. Nebraska, they cannot win a close game if their lives depended on it. They lose them all, every single one of them.
Yeah, and that is Matt Rule, and he's been on the show talking about trying to fix that. That's the part they can't seem to get straight. But you go back to that the next to last year of Scott Frost, when they had a +1 point differential in Big Ten play and went 1-8. So it is it's crazy, but it will be interesting to see if they do start winning, because we look at their schedule and it looks pretty favorable. If they can beat Colorado, listen, a 7-0 start is not out of the question at that point going into the Ohio State game. Does that change how recruits view Nebraska?
Well,
if they are now winning on the field?
Well, I think so, because I also think Nebraska is one of the programs that has all their infrastructure aligned to help them recruit at a high level.
Yeah, I think you may be right. And the thing is, like, from the NIL standpoint, a place like Nebraska, similar to Tennessee, the passion is there. The success has not been there. Tennessee now has some of the success. You're starting to see that pay dividends, and they had the alignment all along. So, Jareth had a question. Since we're on the topic of offensive tackles, how is the buzz around Michael Fasusi in Texas?
Well, I think that we feel like Texas is the program that, like, we would make the odds-on favorite to land Michael Fasusi, but there's a lot of contenders in there. He was at Missouri this past weekend. Oklahoma has been a mainstay in that recruitment. Oregon, Colorado. There's a lot of schools that Texas A&M got several visits in the spring. So I think, even though I point to Texas, if you're like, where do you think he lands today? I would say Texas. Oklahoma, Texas A&M, Missouri, Oregon, some of the other programs that are definitely heavy in there.
So you mentioned that he went and saw Missouri, and Pete Nakos and I were talking about this earlier. It feels like Missouri is one of the schools that has used the changes of the rules to really take advantage, to change its fortunes. They get Luther Burden, they keep Luther Burden. Williams Nwaneri signs this past season. He's going to come in as a freshman now. And we met Matt Zollers last week, he's from Philly. Like, that's not normally the type of place Missouri goes to get somebody, but he certainly seems to fit what they want as a quarterback. How much better are they at even getting guys to take a look now?
Well, Matt Zollers was a pure evaluation recruiting win for Missouri. They unearthed him first, invested a lot of time in him first, and I think in the end, that's what did it. He took those last visits to Georgia, Penn State, but being around Coach Drinkwitz and that program, and just the trust that they had in him, and the early investment and the relationship he built with them, in addition to them finishing in the top 10 last year and recruiting at a high level, all of that came together. But Missouri does not land Zollers if they don't find him first and get a head start from that relationship standpoint. And then they were able to point towards all the exciting things that are going on around the program. But yes, Missouri is very tough to beat for top targets in the region. They're in the mix for some of the best players at the point of attack in the country, and some of those guys are regionally based. Andrew Babalola, I know I gave an RPM to Stanford yesterday, but he was at Missouri this past weekend. He had a great visit, and those are, my predictions have been wrong before, and Missouri could certainly make me be wrong on Andrew Babalola. So could Oklahoma. Yosei Epinesa is a defensive line recruit from Edwardsville High in Illinois, who is a major Iowa legacy. His dad played at Iowa. His brother
AJ played there.
Played at Iowa. His older brother's a preferred walk-on at Iowa. But listen, Coach Drinkwitz brings as much energy from the head coach position as any coach in America. He went to Epinesa's basketball game in the winter and was sitting with the Epinesa family, and Epinesa gets a rebound. Epinesa makes a pass. Epinesa makes a bucket. You would have thought he was watching his son. I mean, he was over the top with the way he was rooting for Epinesa, and the family was feeling it. And he just brings a lot of juice, and it's genuine over the top. Like, that wasn't fake or anything. Like, he was there to root for Epinesa. He was into it. He was into that moment of being there and supporting Epinesa at his basketball game. And that's the kind of stuff that resonates on the trail. When you remember when Rakestraw picked Missouri there at the end.
Yep.
Now, Mizzou knew, he had told Mizzou that he was coming before he went up to the mic and announced it. But these coaches have all been burned.
Yes.
So when he finally, when he said it publicly, that reaction was not for the cameras. That reaction was, we just landed a great player that we love. And it turned out he ended up being a difference maker for them, obviously. As they built this program up. So Coach Drink, one of the most genuine coaches in the country, they have their infrastructure in order to go out there and recruit some of these best players in the country to keep the best players home. They're going to land one of these elite offensive linemen. The one I'm pointing to for them right now is Lamont Rogers from Mesquite Horn in Texas, but maybe they land more than one, so it'll be interesting. But Missouri coming off a heck of a season with a coaching staff that loves recruiting, and the way that they work together kind of reminds me of Kalen DeBoer's staff, just how much they enjoy being around each other. I think that at Missouri, Coach Drinkwitz has created an environment that the guys like working together. So when recruits come on campus or when players are around, they all feel it, and it's resonating. And then certainly the results come on the field.
I feel like that's definitely a vibe that you can see. You can see it even when you're not a recruit, if you're just around a coaching staff, and you can tell if they like each other or not. And I definitely, like, as a player, would certainly want that. I would want my coaches to get along, to enjoy working together. It is not as common as people might think. One more question. I'm sorry I'm peppering you with these, Steve, but this is fantastic. Intelligent Savage 629. Do the Clemson Tigers have any Deshaun Watson style QBs on the radar in the upcoming recruiting class or beyond that you guys know of? So where is Clemson in the quarterback recruiting 2025, 2026? Where are they at right now?
Well, Clemson, they have a top 5 recruiting class right now in the 2025 cycle. Blake Hebert from Massachusetts, 6'2.5", 215-pound signal caller. He committed to Clemson very early, June of 2023. He picked the Tigers over Notre Dame and some others, so they got on him early, got him in the fold. Look, obviously, when you talk about some of the runs that Clemson had and winning a national championship, they had Deshaun Watson and they had Trevor Lawrence, two of the best college quarterbacks and guys that have went on to be difference makers at the pro level. We thought maybe Cade Klubnik could be of that caliber, and maybe he still will. He's still writing his own story. They have not offered a quarterback in 2026 just yet. They don't just throw out offers. There's quite a few really good
you got to go to multiple camps before you get an offer.
Right. So I don't know who they love in 2026 just yet at the position. But certainly for them, they've been at their best when they've been able to say that we've had the best quarterback in the country under center. So I can empathize with the question, man. I just don't have the answer for you right now.
Yeah, that's I kind of figured that's what the answer was, but this is one of those, when you're on the On3 Recruits channel, you're getting the questions from the folks who are deep in this.
Let's go.
A lot of folks here, they want to know, they're not following it as closely. They want to know, okay, is there another Trevor Lawrence coming? But they're not that easy to get. They're few and far between.
There are guys that are developed, it's not like people thought Kenny Pickett was a first round draft pick when he came out, and so and people are like, Kenny Pickett, well, he's not great with the Steelers. Well, he would have been great with
Pitt.
He would have been great with Alabama or Georgia or South, so.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. All right, one more before I let you go. This is just for my own personal curiosity. Ohio State got a commit from Bo Jackson.
Lamar Bo Jackson.
Yes, not Vincent Edward Bo Jackson. But if you're going to go by now, we list him as an athlete. What position is he going to play in college?
He's going to play running back for Ohio State.
Okay.
It's a big position of need for them this cycle, because you look at Travion Henderson and you look at Quinson Judkins. There's not a better backfield in America if those guys are healthy out there playing. I know Penn State would say otherwise with the two that they boast, but Ohio State, they're going to probably lose those two guys at the end of the season, and they got some young guys in the fold, but they need three to come in and push that room. I like where they stand with Isaiah West, who recently decommitted from Kentucky, a 4-star back from out east. And then I think that they're the ones to beat still for Jordan Davison, one of the most sought-after running backs in the country from California. Now, Michigan is trying to change that. Jordan Davison was just at Alabama this past weekend. Oregon is in there, but I like Ohio State for Jordan Davison as well. The Buckeyes looking to sign 3 running backs. Them getting Bo Jackson in the fold first was big from in-state, because he was also looking hard at Georgia and Alabama. So protecting the state, putting a wall around the border, as they used to say, and he's a really good football player, and Ohio State trending for 2 more backs after him.
Thank you so much for watching. Just a reminder, subscribe to this channel right here so you never miss an episode of Andy Staples on 3. And oh, by the way, watch all the other great videos on the On3 Sports YouTube channel.